April 10th, 2010, Keish's TikTok sits at number 10 on the top 100 Billboard hits. Apple released the first iPad just days before, and it's a day unlike any other for the crew of Polish Air Force Flight 101 as they dreadingly await departure from Warsaw Chopin Airport. With a flight crew of 4 and 92 passengers on board, their destination is Smolensk Sovereign Aerodrome in Smolensk, Russia. To commemorate the 70th anniversary of the Katyn massacre, a delegation of Polish government officials were sent to attend the event at the Katyn Memorial Site 10 miles west of Smolensk Sovereign, where in 1941 over 21,000 Polish intelligentsia and army officers in captivity would be mercilessly massacred under order of Joseph Stalin. The flight crew, composed of pilot in command Captain Arkadiusz Protasiuk, First Officer Major Robert Grzynia, a navigator, and flight engineer, are commissioned officers of the Polish Air Force's 36th Special Air Transport Regiment. The aircraft they'll be flying to Smolensk is a Tupolev Tu-154M, an interesting staple of Soviet commercial aviation and an airframe they've only had brief experience with during their careers as pilots in the Polish Air Force. Developed by OKB Tupolev as a tri-jet passenger airliner, the Tu-154 would see production until 1993. With a commercial weight of 75 tons and around 1,050 airframes built, the first handful of Tu-154 airframes were delivered to Aeroflot in around October or November of 1971 for flight crew training. The 154 has an operational range of 3,725 nautical miles and was exported to several nations outside of the Warsaw Pact, including Syrian Air, Mania Air, and for a very brief period of time Egypt Air until December of 1973. By the end of the 1990s, nearly every division of Aeroflot were operators of the Tu-154. Some airframes saw use with the Russian Ministry of Defense, while a handful of others were ordered by the Russian Air Force for use in transport roles. Its NATO designation is Careless, with the C in Careless standing for cargo. Chilling name considering the track record of accidents the Tu-154 has under its belt. Of the list of countries to receive the Tu-154, Poland was one of them. Being issued to the Polish Air Force in 1990, this airframe in particular, the 154M, is configured to carry 180 passengers and has had 3 overhauls, with the most recent of which being in December of 2009. The difference between the Tu-154M and its older variants were its engines. The M variant was powered by 3 Soloviev D30KU-154 engines as part of a modernization package. Its predecessor, the Tu-154B, was powered by 3 NK8 engines. The passenger roster of this flight has notable figures from Polish government and military circles, including President Lech Kaczynski, representing the Law and Justice Party of Poland.
Obywatelki i obywatele Polskiej Rzeczypospolitej Ludowej. Zwracam się dziś do Was.
In Poland, it's more than 20 hours since the military took a move they said to prevent civil war.
Born June 18, 1949 in Warsaw, Kaczynski studied law at the University of Warsaw and earned his PhD at Gdańsk University. After acting as a legal advisor for the Solidarity movement and being detained following the 1981 martial law declaration by General Jaruzelski, Kaczynski was elected a member of the Sejm in 1989 and maintained various positions in office, even being appointed to the position of Supreme Control Chamber in early 1992 until he would be sidelined in the November elections of 1995. A conservative politician along with his brother, Jarosław Kaczynski, they created the right-wing leaning Law and Justice Party prior to the elections of fall of 2001. Kaczynski would later be elected mayor of Warsaw in 2002. One of his most controversial acts as mayor was the banning of pride parades affiliated with the LGBTQ movement. After declaring his desire to run in the upcoming 2005 election, he won 54% of the vote, beating Donald Tusk, making him the 4th elected president of the Republic of Poland. In 2008, he visited Georgia's capital, Tbilisi, to stand in solidarity with Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili after the 5-day affair that was the Russo-Georgian War. There he would speak to a large crowd addressing Russian aggression. How'd he get there? Via the same Tu-154, including the captain that would later transport him and his mission to Smolensk, except instead he was acting as first officer, and Tbilisi was not a scheduled stop on the flight plan. Polish Air Force 101's route that day entailed a takeoff from Warsaw to Tallinn in Estonia, back to Warsaw, to Simferopol, Crimea, and finally to Genza, Azerbaijan for the Baku Energy Summit talks. The pilot in command was notified during the layover in Crimea that the commander-in-chief wanted to land in Tbilisi for the rally. The captain, knowing the risk of landing in a war zone, denied the request due to safety precautions. Once airborne, President Lech Kaczynski entered the crew cabin repeating his request to land in Tbilisi, on top of having a handwritten note issued by the deputy commander-in-chief to the flight crew expressing the same request. The captain made the decision to land in Genza, and the Polish officials arrived in Tbilisi by motorcade. The captain would later be discharged. With the stage set and our characters introduced, let's pivot back to that fateful day in April. As a result of the pressure, Protashik and his crew felt determined to land, even at the expense of ignoring the aircraft's instruments. Combined with political figures like the diplomatic director peering into the crew cabin to assert their desire to land, it culminated in the perfect disaster. While on approach in thick fog, the leading edge side of the left wing would hit a tree just a few hundred meters before the runway, resulting in the aircraft banking to the left and rolling into a hill. All 96 passengers and crew members on board would perish. Out of the trauma and tears wept by the Polish people, ordinary citizens scramble for explanations as to how such a traumatic accident could have occurred. Automatically, accusations and theories shake the international community, with one of the most prominent theories being that it was an assassination attempt on the president. Poles were hesitant to trust Russian investigators of the Interstate Aviation Committee, and even Polish officials who were looking into the accident, believing that the Polish government was complicit in helping the Kremlin with the so-called assassination attempt. Defense Minister Antony Macierewicz even demanded Donald Tusk be put before trial for it, claiming he was involved in the plot. All of this with no evidence to push the martyr narrative from the Second World War, a stance law and justice was notorious for. Law and justice were quick to draw parallels between the accident and Katyn itself, in an attempt to control and manipulate Polish history. The true answer behind the cause of the accident was much simpler. With the diplomatic control director lingering over the crew, sterile cockpit procedures were violated, impeding the decision-making of the crew and resulting in the feeling of pressure on the pilot, fearing that if he didn't at least attempt the landing, he would have been relieved from his job similar to the Azerbaijan incident in 2008. The captain changing his altimeter and ignoring the TAW's callouts resulted in the navigator using his radio altimeter to determine the rate of descent, only issue being that before the aerodrome was a valley, meaning that instead of descending onto the runway, they were descending onto the head of the valley, and due to low visibility, the crew were unable to identify the terrain features below and in front of them. The combination of calculations and distractions culminated in the perfect recipe for a tragic accident. Accidents like these are tragic due to their preventability and influence on a nation. Its effects would haunt and linger around Poland. The Polish Air Force's 36th Special Air Transport Regiment would later be disbanded as a result of the accident, and Jarosław Kaczynski would go on to kickstart another investigation of the accident, citing terrorism at the hands of Russia with still no substantial evidence.